Good evening and welcome to Story Hour. I'm tonight's host, Laura Blackwell. My marvelous co-host, marvelous Daniel Marcus, started Story Hour about 2 years ago because, shelter-in-place orders were starting and he just felt like he needed to hang out with his buddies and hear some stories. And then more of us came on and decided that we really needed to hang out and hear stories from buddies and maybe from strangers, just, really great stories, complete stories. And so every Wednesday since, we've been getting together and having authors read their own stories to us. And we really like it. We hope you do too. We have a pretty simple format, been the same since the beginning. We have 2 writers, and each of them is reading for a favorite nonprofit. Tonight's readers are returning favorite Michael Conley and soon-to-be new favorite Marissa Lingen. If you are fortunate enough to help others during this time, please consider a donation to one or both of tonight's featured nonprofits, Manchester Refugee Support Network and Alliance for the Great Lakes. Michael Conley is reading for the Manchester Refugee Support Network. MRSN helps asylum seekers and refugees across Greater Manchester to get the basic support they need to live with dignity. Its aims are to support refugees to access services and opportunities on an equal basis, to educate refugees and asylum seekers on their rights and responsibilities as active citizens, and to empower refugees to establish strong community organizations and provide platforms for them to represent the needs and aspirations of their communities. You can learn more at mrsn.org.uk. Marissa Lingen is reading for the Alliance for the Great Lakes, 2 regional charities. I love it when we get the regional ones because I don't always hear about them otherwise. The Alliance for the Great Lakes is a nonpartisan nonprofit working across the region to protect our most precious resource, the fresh, clean, and natural waters of the Great Lakes. The Alliance for the Great Lakes connects and empowers people to advocate, give back, and take action to protect the lakes. AGL accomplishes this with 3 connected approaches: advocacy and leadership, education and action, and research and analysis. You can learn more at greatlakes.org. There is right now a really neat article there on their victory over plastic nurdles. Recommended. If you're here on Zoom, feel free to leave your camera on. It can be really nice for our readers to watch as we react to the stories. And if you can also chime in on the chat in Zoom on the right. If you're on Facebook, we are delighted to have you, and we aren't there quite all the time, so you won't find as lively a conversation there. But we will get back to you as soon as we can, promise. So our first reader tonight is Michael Conley. And Michael Conley is reading for us tonight for, I think he deserves a round of applause for this, calling in from the UK, which is many hours in the future from us. For me, it's about 7 in the evening. For him, it's 3 in the morning. So thank you, Michael. You are most valiant. Michael Conley is a poet and short story writer from Manchester, UK. His latest publication is a pamphlet, These Are Not My Dreams, and Anyway, Nothing Here Is Purple, published in 2021 by 9 Pens Press. That's pens like you write with, not 9 pins like bowling. I thought that was pretty cute. Michael, welcome.
Hi. I'm so pleased to be back. Thank you for that, for your introduction. I read around, it was about a year ago, wasn't it? Maybe a little longer, but I had a great time. So it's definitely worth staying up till 3 a.m. to come back. It's really nice. So I've timed it. I think I read 2 stories last time. I'm going to read just one. I've timed this, and it's a little bit of a longer one, but this is a story from my collection of prose called Flare and Falter, which was published a couple of years ago. So this story is called All the Little Yous Just Find Each Other. I probably should kind of say that Sunderland is a town in the northeast of England. I guess you could have worked that out, but it's a small town. That's going to appear in the first sentence. All the little U's just find each other. It started with Grace Quirk, the 8-year-old from Sunderland, shuffling nervously onto the Britain's Got Talent stage, accompanied by her beaming mother and father. Body hunched like her tightly folded bud, gaze glued to an imaginary point on the floor a couple of feet ahead of her own shoes, she answered the judge's questions about herself with timid yelps, and not even the famed charm attack of the larger-than-life Bollywood director and impresario Narendra Lamba, head judge for the past 5 seasons, could convince her to allow them a smile. But the parents were confident. They knew they had a star, something world-changing. The girls said nothing, just waited for the house lights to go down and for her parents to retreat backstage into the dark. In the spotlight, she closed her eyes and balled up her fists tightly. For a minute, there was quiet in the auditorium. It had not been made clear to anyone what the little girl was going to do, but she was cute enough in her lime green party dress and white sandals for the audience's rustlings and murmurings to be generally kept to a respectful minimum. At the end of the second minute, the girl opened her eyes and looked back towards her parents in the wings. Then she looked at the judges with a nervous smile. "Don't worry, sweetheart," Narendra Lamba boomed, leaning forward into his microphone. "Try to relax. Try again. We're all behind you, aren't we, everyone?" The audience, semi-reluctantly, whooped and cheered. Grace clamped her arms to her sides and clenched her eyes shut again. This time a full 3 minutes passed, and the girl began to tremble with effort, a sheen of sweat beginning to appear on her forehead. Again, she gave up. She looked to be on the verge of tears. The rustling in the audience took on a more impatient tone. "Think of something that makes you happy," advised the second judge, Lady Z. "I know just how you feel. It's okay." Lady Z was barely out of adolescence herself and had won the competition several years before as a singer. She gave the girl a thumbs up and a wide grin. Grace blushed, sniffed, wiped her eyes with the back of her hand, and tried again. This time, it was clear something was different. She kept her eyes open, looking up at a spot high in the gods and blinking, long, slow blinks at increasingly long intervals. Then Grace took a single step forward, as though she'd been lightly shoved in the back, and suddenly a noise, low and plosive and echoing, like the pop of a microphone. She was gone, and in her place a small explosion of pink cherry blossom fluttered silently down onto the stage boards where her crumpled clothing lay. The crowd went wild. Narendra Lamba sprung to his feet and climbed onto his desk, roaring with delight. He jumped up and down, his huge feet crashing into the table so hard that it split in two, and he went down in a shower of red and yellow sparks kicked up from the light-up buzzers. Laughing, he picked himself up and started running backwards and forwards across the pit below the stage. The other 2 judges sat perfectly still, their jaws flapping like wilted roses. Once the blossom had all settled and the noise had died down, Grace's parents scuttled on with small wicker baskets and began gathering her up. The world's press packed the vast front garden of Narendra Lamba's Los Angeles mansion. He sat at a trestle table outside his front door with Grace at his side, his arm draped proprietorially over her shoulders. On the other side of her was Lady Z, holding her hand. Her parents stood behind. It was dusk. They waited patiently for the noise of thousands of questions, shouted simultaneously in multiple languages to die down. "How did you do it? Tell us the trick." Grace coughed. "It's not a trick. I just think about doing it, and then I do it." "It must be a trick. You're a liar." Grace glanced back at her parents, then shrugged a little sadly. "I'm not a liar." The journalist was escorted discreetly away by one of the sharp-suited monoliths in Lamber's security team. "How does it feel to be Blossom?" She smiled. "It feels good." There was a pause. Lady Z squeezed Grace's hand. It feels like love. It feels like, when sometimes you love your mum or dad so much that you want to hug them, but even when you're hugging them, you can't hug them enough. Well, being Blossom feels like you finally hugged them enough." The world's press fell completely silent just for a moment. Then somebody else yelled out again. "Does it hurt?" "No, it doesn't hurt. It feels like when you're in a car and the car is going too fast down a hill and your stomach leaps up inside you for a moment." Narendra Lambert leaned forward as though to place his hand over Grace's microphone. Don't say any more, Grace. You'll get Dad in trouble for dangerous driving. There was a ripple of laughter from the journalists. Lambert turned and winked theatrically at Grace's father, who smiled and nodded. How do you change back? It's hard to explain. She paused and brushed a strand of hair off her face. When you blossom, you're still you, but it's hundreds of little yous. So when you want to change back, all the little yous just find each other. She stopped and blushed and beckoned Lady Z down to face level so that she could whisper something into her ear. Lady Z laughed and leaned forward to speak into the microphone. Grace says you have to be careful when you change back because you're nude, so you need somebody to be ready with some clothes. The journalist laughed again. When did you first realize you could do it? Not long ago. It was the day after my 8th birthday party. It had been such a nice day and I was eating my breakfast, thinking about my friends, and it just happened. At first I was afraid, but after I came back together and realized I wasn't hurt, I just thought it was normal. Can you teach us to do it? Grace giggled. That was the first thing Mr. Lambert asked me. Lambert pulled a mock innocent face and slapped the back of his own hand. I don't know if I can teach you, maybe. She thought for a moment. Try it. You have to relax. You can't force it, but you can step out of your body. Just step out of your body. The whispered phrase snaked around the throng of assembled journalists, translating itself into multiple languages. You can step out of your body. Just step out of your body. The first one to do it was the French journalist from Le Monde. She was very close to the front, so everyone saw her burst, her red-rimmed glasses suddenly and almost comically unsupported and dropping with her press pass into the pile of her pantsuit. Then others followed, the strange popping sounds building to a crescendo, like an ecstatic giant rolling around on a giant sheet of bubble wrap. The cameras kept rolling, but soon there was nobody to point them at the new picture. The garden, full of empty piles of clothing, the pink blossoms swirling on little breezes like a snow globe scene, and eventually even the celebrities, even Grace's parents, following suit, until the girl was left alone at the table, beaming. As people got better at controlling it, the worldwide murder and violent crime rate dropped. Of course, you could still die and still be hurt, but given enough warning, you could now respond to threats by blossoming. The blossom itself was very difficult to destroy since it didn't seem to affect reanimation, even if individual pieces were damaged. And also because it was in a way sentient. Anyone trying to dispose of it would have to do so very quickly and all at once, since it could disperse and float away at will. It was possible, but it became a huge taboo to interfere with somebody else's blossom. People were worried at first when criminals from every single one of the world's prisons all escaped at once. But this was offset by the fact that crimes were harder to commit now, and also that people didn't seem to really want or need things as much as they had before. Drug and alcohol abuse pretty much ceased overnight since blossoming was cheaper and felt better. In fact, some people, especially children, fully checked out. Everybody was absolutely unmanageable and difficult to educate. Since you couldn't stop people from blossoming and since it felt so great, lots of people pretty much rejected their human form altogether. People could maintain their blossom state, it seemed, for various lengths of time before their bodies forced them to change back. Most people's cool-down period for changing either way was around 72 hours. For the rest of us, wages went up because labour was scarce, and we managed to keep things running using a 3-day working week because most people needed less of everything. Most countries quickly developed the infrastructure to provide at least some basic emergency clothing for the public, hung on hooks on street corners. Still, it was commonplace enough to see naked people running around after turning back, that taboos surrounding nudity shrank to almost nothing, even in cultures that had previously been conservative. In fact, many hang-ups about sex and sexuality disappeared too. If a piece of your blossom touched a piece of somebody else's blossom, you felt an intimate bond with them that remained even after you changed back, as though the two of you knew each other as well as old lovers might. In this way, many of the world's oldest and most intransigent political conflicts were all but resolved. It sent both the scientific and the religious communities into spirals. The particle physicists could just about accept the possibility, however implausible, of an initial break into blossom, but they were completely stumped by the ease with which people could turn back into their original bodies. They complained that they would have to strike out the second law of thermodynamics entirely and find a new paradigm. Religious leaders did best when they avoided making rules and instead tried to find cryptic references to blossoming made by whichever prophets were most useful to them. Grace herself was co-opted into all of the major world belief systems in some way, and statues of her sprang up everywhere. Everyone talked about it constantly, even in the months and years after it. It became the central subject of all art and poetry. It seemed like such a climactic event that the world agreed on a new year zero, and recorded history became before Grace and after Grace. It felt like a fundamental part of human existence that we had just accidentally missed for the first couple of thousand years, like suddenly realizing we all had an invisible extra arm. It was the great equalizer that broke down barriers between cultures, religions, races, classes, nationalities. How could anyone hate anyone when all humans had the capacity for this? All humans except me. I don't know whether I've fully accepted that I'll never be able to do it. In the aftermath of Grace, part of me hoped that one day I would try it and it would work for me. I've studied the videos countless times, but all she says is we must relax and then we can step out of our bodies. I keep trying to believe I can, but it's been 4 years. I'm not aware of anyone else in the world like me. It's like I turned up late to the greatest celebration in the history of the world, and now nobody can hear me ringing the doorbell. There isn't a word for what I am, not even a slur. Squib is the most obvious one, I suppose. That's how I see myself. I'm a functioning party popper, a soaked firework. Or a more inventive, more hurtful insult might have something to do with meat, like I'm someone who can't let go of being meat, like pork chop. Try and blossom pork chop. Get back in your pig pen, pork chop, they'd say if they knew. In truth, they probably wouldn't even think to be so cruel, since blossoming evidently affords them the sort of empathetic worldview that I can only dream of. The worst day of the year for me is May 24th, Grace Quirk's birthday, Blossom Day. In thanksgiving to her, the entire world spends the whole 24 hours as Blossom. The first time, I actually enjoyed the peace and quiet, and even the ugliest places I knew were undeniably beautiful. But these days I dread it. It's always too quiet. There's nothing on TV, all the shops are shut. I become anxious that somehow everyone will just collectively decide not to bother going back to being meat ever again, and I'll just grow old and die among the blossom. Most of the time, I feel embarrassment and shame. The first thing I had to do, especially in the first few months where everybody was blossoming pretty much all of the time, was to find a legitimate reason why nobody was ever going to see me do it. Luckily, the Quakers had found an obscure piece of doctrine which they interpreted as an instruction that blossoming, though beautiful and fundamental, was something sacred to be done quietly and privately without fuss or ceremony. So I started telling everyone I was a devout Quaker. There are some places I can't go anymore without arousing suspicion. Football matches, for example, where the convention is now for the crowd to break into blossom whenever their team scores. Weddings, where obviously confetti is no longer required. Any sort of relationship is out of the question. I've seen enough films and read enough literature to know that not blossoming immediately after orgasm is these days so insulting it's practically deviant behavior. The last time I tried with a woman from one of the Quaker meetings, I tried to obfuscate and delay for as long as possible. And then pathetically, when the moment came, I even tried to fake it, claiming that we'd both blossomed and reformed at exactly the same time, and that's why she hadn't seen me. It was desperate, and she saw through it immediately. I tried to explain that I was extremely devout, that I couldn't even do it in front of her, but that just upset and alienated her. She kept trying to understand me, so that in the end, I just had to keep calling her horrible names until she left. Her final text message to me read, "What's wrong with you?" I didn't reply. I wish I knew. I liked her. That was 1.5 years ago. I've often wondered if Grace herself could help me, if I could somehow explain things to her. I mean, I know she's not magic, but she did start it all. In my fantasy, she's back in Sunderland, perhaps tending her mother or father through a serious illness that I've read about in the paper, and I've driven for several hours to reach her, perhaps on a blossom day, so that we're the only two conscious people in the world. She answers the door of her parents' house, the one she grew up in, that they famously insisted on staying in, even after her fame and fortune. She invites me without a word through to the back room, where, judging by the chocolate bar wrappers and discarded magazines, she's clearly ensconced herself in, let's say, an old armchair next to her parents' bed. There's a small, sad pile of blossom on the bed that's either her mother or her father. She flops down into the armchair and I remain in the doorway. I point to the pile of blossom. "Your father?" I ask. "Yes," she says. How is he? She sighs. Not good, not good. Next time he changes back, that'll be it, they reckon. I'm sorry. Are you? She says. I don't expect this slightly passive-aggressive response. I don't know if I'm sorry or not. It's just something you say. There's an awkward pause, during which she glances down at a magazine. Aren't you going to ask me who I am, I say, or what I want or why I'm here? She shrugs. You're probably going to tell me at some point. Let me guess, it's something about the blossom. I'm here because I can't do it, I say. It's the first and only time I've ever acknowledged the fact out loud. She laughs to herself, doesn't even look at me, just continues turning the pages of the magazine. You can't do what? I mean, I can't do it. I can't turn into Blossom. I keep trying, but I just can't. Like you in that video, those first times. She rolls her eyes at the memory. You must be able to do it. Everyone can do it. I remain patient. Imagine being so comfortable in your own brilliance that you can manage to be bored and blasé about discovering that humans can turn into Blossom and making the world an indisputably safer and more beautiful place for the whole of humanity. I really can't do it, I insist. Somehow this time it reaches her. She slowly puts the magazine down and looks up at me, as though seeing me for the first time. Well, fuck, she says at last. I shrug in vague agreement. She shakes her head in disbelief. I feel a tightness in my chest and hot tears gathering in my eyes, terrified that the visit was a waste of time. I can't help you turn into Blossom, she says. I'm sorry. I turn to leave, trudge through the hallway out to the blossom-strewn streets. As my hand touches the latch on the front door, I hear her shout through. Wait, there may be another option. I stop, not yet turning back to face her. Just theoretically, she shouts. If their aware could stop all of this, make it impossible for anyone to do it, put things back the way they were, would you want that? I walk back into the room and look her in the eye. I think about how much happier and more peaceful everyone is now. I think about Grace's father on the bed, his life prolonged way beyond prognosis, afforded the opportunity to live out his final hours in a state of bliss, not pain. I think of all the lives prolonged thanks to her miraculous discovery. I think of the story on the news just the previous day, by no means unusual, of the toddler who had slipped from a high-rise balcony, and of the tragedy that would have played out if he hadn't been able to blossom and float slowly down on the breeze instead. I think about how easy it was before for one person to trap or imprison or subdue another person, compared to how difficult, almost impossible it is now. I think about the world, imperfect and unequal, how deprivation and suffering still exist, but how, thanks to Grace Quirk, all sufferers have at least some access to at least some happiness and respite. And then I say, yes, I'd want that. I'd want you to stop it. We look at each other for a long time, her mouth a single serious line. Then she nods. It's impossible to tell whether it's a nod of empathy or a nod of disappointment. She grants me a long silence. I consider again. Would it ever get back that it was me, that I was the one who asked? She shakes her head. I nod. She waves her hand and the tips of her fingers glow gold. There's a change in the air, like the sense of thick pregnancy before a storm. Then a sudden, gentle shift on the bed, her father beginning to reform. We both watch the petals move, sadly. Get out, she says, and I do.
Oh, that was powerful. Sweet in places and sad in others. Thank you. We always need a moment to reset between the stories. I have to also put in a PSA that I misspoke earlier, and the war against plastic nurdles has not actually been won on the Great Lakes, but is still raging on. So I do recommend checking out greatlakes.org to find out how you can discuss this with your congressperson to stop the invasion of plastic nurdles. I really did screw that up on purpose, but getting to say nurdles a few more times is always worth it. And our next reader tonight is Marissa Lingen. Marissa Lingen lives in the Twin Cities area on some of the oldest bedrock in North America. She is the author of hundreds of works of short fiction and fantasy, short science fiction, and fantasy, poems and essays. She is inordinately fond of tisanes, moomins, and botanically themed jewelry. Welcome, Marissa.
Hi, wow, what an act you gave me to follow, Michael. The story that I'm going to read for you, and I think I'm going to read just one, but we'll see what time it is when I finish. This one originally appeared in Beneath Ceaseless Skies magazine, and it is called Every Tiny Tooth and Claw, or Letters from the First Month of the New Directorate. And it starts with the date, 7 Fruiting, 6:34. My dearest Pippa, today I walked past the flat you lived in when I first knew you, on my way to the only glassmaker in the city still working. The earthworkers were having a protest outside in the street. One of them had the long, uneven haircut you wore then. I think I would have joined their march even without seeing that eager youth. But really, what else could I do? So I went a mile out of my way to march outside the Directorate and sing angry songs. And I nearly missed picking up my flasks before the glassmaker closed. But I knew you would approve. I love you. In any case, I made it back to the university in time for my consultation with young Vithro. Really, her work is coming along nicely. I expect she'll be defending her thesis within a season or two. She's got the background down. It's just coming up with her capstone spell, and she's very close on that. She wanted me to write letters for the elder Vithro and also for her neighborhood committee, testifying to the value of her research. I was only too glad to do it. I also told her that we've started keeping track of which neighborhood committees are friendly to the university. I hope she doesn't have to use it, but at least now she knows. She'd be reluctant to move because of her mother's position on the Directorate, hesitant to appear to be seeking special treatment, which is the right thing to do. She's always been conscientious. I suppose it's her upbringing. I was glad to focus on Vithro's work as a break from my own, which has hit some serious shoals. Mostly I'm staring glumly at pictures of river water, trying to pretend there's the least hint for where this spell will go next. Too many contributing streams in this section of the river mouth, Pip. What have I gotten myself into? I would rather think of you. Write soon and give me more of those thoughts. I'm glad you're safe from all the upheaval, but oh, I miss you dreadfully. All my love, Aaron. 20 Fruiting, 6:34. Aaron, my dear. To think I complained the spells necessary for the bird post when I first moved to Wolf Grove, and now I couldn't be more grateful that they've become second nature to me, with all the Imperial post in and out of Gulls Point interrupted for the foreseeable future. This revolution of ours, my dear, it is not convenient. But for you, I will gladly hex the poor swallows until they sparkle. I couldn't do without your letters, Aunt. I can barely do without you for the term of this sabbatical. But the size of bird required to bear me safely home, hex or no hex, is not to be thought of this far north of Terexar, so I had best get on with my research and not grumble too much. Possibly we should come up with some kind of spell to tell whether the birds have been intercepted, though. I'm told it's happened before with Directorate officials, and I don't like the thought of anyone else reading my soppy, silly letters to you. Soppy and silly is for your eyes only. I ran into Judith Voss in the street yesterday, going into the Bard's library. She didn't know me right away, which made me realize that she'd have last seen me before transition. You know, at the Thaumanatology conference in Greenock, when it wouldn't stop raining, and we stayed in dormitories drinking cider like undergraduates when we were supposed to be solemnly conferring. In any case, Judith and I got reacquainted with each other quite cordially, and then she had some fascinating news about the thaumistic properties of stalking mole rats in Singer and Woolrich's latest paper. Well, fascinating to me, you might not have known that clothed mole rats are the nearest known cousin of my beloved herdling dormice. Well, they are, and this latest finding may shed some light on the obfuscation abilities of both. I shall write to Singer about it. Woolrich has never much liked me. I would put something sarcastic here about how lucky you are to get such love letters from me, full of dormice, but you'd only write back earnestly to say you do feel lucky. I know you by now. Well, I feel lucky too, all right? You just remember that. And remember your fern tea. You're always miserable from the teleporting pine pollen at the end of fruiting. Drink your tea, you'll feel better. I fuss because I love. I do love. I love you ferociously. Pippa. 2 Cider 634. My darling Pip. The morning got away from me yesterday. Just little things stacked up. Nothing to worry about, although there are rumblings in the lower city, and I admit I am a bit uncertain about next year's funding. I went to the neighborhood's collective work session in the orchard in the afternoon, glum and frustrated that your letter would be delayed by another day. By the time we finished work, I realized I would have to write you another right away anyway. I know, you would have been fine with 2 letters. I also know I'm ridiculous, as long as we're clear on both points. In any case, when we got up the trees in the orchard, we discovered that they were infested by velvet shrews. The little wretches had sampled the apples with their long, narrow bites, but they remembered they were carnivores in time to leave us most of a harvest. The problem was getting it all down. While the apples didn't suit their tastes, our flesh did. How does this interest you? I know, I'm coming to the point. So, Elena, do you remember Elena? Very short hair, assistant to the bursar? If you do, you remember she's barely bigger than a velvet shrew herself. So when one of the little boogers bit her, her hand camouflaged itself. Yes, like the shrews do. She blended right into the tree, texture, the bark, and all. Uncanny. I know this is not the same as going invisible, not by a long shot, but I've never heard of it being transmissible before. And I said to myself, thaumatic appearance change in rodents, that's at least related to Pippa's work. And I told Stelving, and he agreed, so we told the committee, and they agreed, that trapping an even dozen of the weed pests would be a service to thaumatic research and agricultural bounty alike. Well, there may be a reason your lover has not been recruited by the Exterminators Guild heretofore. But Stelving, like the rest of your department, has a good bit more experience with the humane capture of thaumatically influenced creatures. And 1 or 2 of the neighborhood children were quite keen. I never thought I'd see the day that Tinker Halen's youngest brat was useful for, no, that's unkind. The lad simply has high spirits. Very, very high. In any case, the thing is done. We have now, in my office of all places, 12 velvet shrews, stubbornly camouflaging to fit their new board cages, but present all the same. They gnaw. You give them frogs, and afterwards they gnaw the leg bones. It's grisly. I try to think that every tiny tooth and claw is a gift to you, and that helps a little. I hope I'm right. So, I am taking charge of them for the moment, anything to distract me from my own estuary of woes, and I will see what crude observations I can make of them. And Stelving is sending students over to peer at them and feed them frogs. Shudder. I should like to tell you to come home soon and look after these shoes, but your research there in Wolf Grove is important, and I'm not sure you'd be quite comfortable here, the way things are going with the council. So we will do the best we can. In any case, there's a curfew at the moment that would annoy the life out of you. I can just hear you demanding to know how you're supposed to get your work done, how you're supposed to think at all without your witching hour rambles. But I do wish you were here. I'm glad you haven't given it all up to sit by waiting for me to find useful rodents. I still may not have. But I miss you, I do. I've never contemplated leaving the city for longer than a conference, or maybe some field research before. But developments have made it more appealing, and if the Directorate isn't funding my work, I'll have to make some hard choices. I sometimes think the world has been turned upside down so much in the last 2 years. What would one more upheaval even mean to me? I mean, if it was the right one, if it let us be together. We don't have to answer that yet. I love you. Aaron. 10 Cider 634. Dearest Aaron, this is incredible. You're absolutely right. We've never seen transmissible thaumatic properties like this in any of the vanishing breeds. It's an extremely exciting sort of middle ground. Can you get the students to extract venom from the shrew's fangs? Ask the snake specialists to help if the mammal specialists don't know what I mean. Any of the herbomancy department will do, but really all but the most junior students should be fine doing it. You're such a dear to start into this for me. It must be a lot of bother compared to your usual peaceful hydromancy. I always thought it must be serene working with flowing waters, but on reflection, it doesn't seem to affect you that way. Possibly this is due to the turbulent effects of other hydromancers? Speaking of whom, how is young Vithra's thesis? Flourishing, I hope? Not too disarrayed, nibbled by shrews? Judith and her family have taken me very much under their collective wing. So in addition to lots of discussion about work, I've been introduced to their favorite tavern and their favorite recipes. Oh, Arendt, you would hate the herring dish they make here. Hate. It is both curried and pickled, and I think it's lovely. If I could just see your face as I write this. And I think of you every time I eat it, which is at least twice a week, because of that face. I love you so much. I miss you so much. I don't want to make all our letters about shrews, love, but I've attached a table I'd like to see filled out with different properties of the shrews and their venom. Thank you. Kisses. I love you. Pippa. P.S. Judith just came in and said the letter she got from her thesis advisor was really alarming. What happened there? Are you all right? Never mind the plagued table. Write soon about you. Anything. Just let me know you're safe. Love. 22 Cider 634. Dearest Pippa, I hope you haven't been too worried. What an odd letter Judith's advisor must have written. I don't know what they were thinking. We're all quite well. Here's what happened. On 3 Cider, the past directorate was consolidated. Now, instead of 7 elected directors, we'll have 3 permanent ones. This will certainly be much more efficient and will benefit every citizen. Certainly, I can't think of anyone who is not happy about this opportunity. Of course, there have been many changes. The curfew has been extended and rationing instituted. There is a freeze on further funding at the university until vital directorate programs like the Directorate-sponsored newspaper and the directors' parades have had their funds thoroughly allocated. So we must all do the best we can. At this point, frogs are not being rationed, so please don't worry about the shrews either. I've tried to fill out the table you sent as best I could, although student labor has been much reduced. Many students have been required for work on the new earthworks along the river mouth, and those who are still at the university have been assigned to re-education for the good of the directorate. It would be immensely useful if I still had someone like young Vethro to help me, but of course without her connection to the recently retired director. If I knew where she was, I would be obliged to tell the city guard, but I haven't the faintest notion. If only she were somewhere quite nearby, I would certainly rely on her help with shrew care and also figuring out the hydromantic implications of the river mouth earthworks. But alas, please tell me how things are in Wolf Grove. I would love to hear what sorts of things you are doing there, and also your colleagues in the hydromantic department, what sorts of projects they are doing. How interesting are the ways of other lands. Also your voyage there, my love. You know how I like to share the little details of your life, even from this far away. Are there many caravans available to ride with? Or did you have to wait quite some time for one? My neighborhood is taking another shift in the cornfields for the good of the directorate, so I must close this earlier than I would like. Please remember that I love you and remain always your Aaron. My own dearest Aaron, I am so relieved to hear that everything has turned out for the best. How worried I would be if you were experiencing some kind of political chaos, but it sounds like the directorate has things well in hand. I have shared your most recent letter with Judith, so she can be exactly as relieved as I am. I was thinking only yesterday of what an abundance of hydromantic research there would be here in Wolf Grove, with the confluence of 3 rivers in the area, not to mention smaller streams. But of course, none of that is important now, as the directory needs you for their own vital projects. I hope that Stelving has not gotten too caught up in the harvest to help you observe the shrew's winter nest building on a quantitative level. The composition and thickness of the den walls can tell us much about how these little creatures expect the next few months to go. But perhaps you can give me qualitative estimates, and that will still be useful. I fear they have a harsh winter ahead. Only you will know. I've heard back from Singer about his clothed mole rats, and I think the insight he had there applies to your velvet shoes as well as to my curdling dormice. I've attached some figures. Perhaps you will see what I mean. Perhaps few others will. Please don't worry about me in this strange land. The trip here was smooth and relatively cheap, with so many caravans each week that I had my pick of trustworthy drivers. I expect any other careful traveler would find the same. Many of the inns had charming names like the Tipsy Heron and the Vindictive Trout. Luckily, the latter did not live up to its name. The people in Wolfgrove have all been most kind, and though it is not my home, the dormice find it very comfortable and go hurtling around their dens at alarming rates. You would smile to see them. Please write soon to tell me all the wonders accomplished under the Directorate, or a small portion you can fit in a letter. I miss you dreadfully. All my love. 3 Unity, Year 1. Pip dear, very thick walls on these dens, my love. I see the figures you have sent very clearly. No time to talk as we are preparing for a grand procession. Expect more soon. Love always, Aaron. 7 Unity 1, really 15 wine, 634. My dearest Pippa, you were absolutely right about how we could use the shrew's venom. You were also right about the stability of the Directorate. Yes, love, I'm saying it outright. I was wrong and you were right. Young Vithro and I are safe in Silver Lake with 4 very disgruntled shrews, 2 unconscionably heavy jugs of water, 1 from the river and 1 from the bay, I have hopes, and an arrangement to travel with the next caravan to Wolfgrove, which leaves in 3 days. So this bird should beat us there with enough time that you can make preparations. That's ostensibly why I'm writing. Mostly I could not make you wait another fortnight and more to hear that your advice worked and I am safely out and on my way to you. Oh, Pippa, our home. Sweetheart, our home. I don't know what will become of it. But we'll talk about that later at length, at the very greatest length. In the meantime, the shrew venom lotion from your equations was a smashing success. Young Vithro passed through the city gates without anyone giving her face another glance, even though she was on the Directorate's wanted posters. She waited for me with supplies and shrews at the orchard Elena's cousin runs. Dear Elena, you will not believe the number of people it took to get the 2 of us out, yet all kind and wise and silent as the very grave. Not the shrews. They are not silent, the little wretches. I wish I could have left them all with Stelving. He likes this sort of thing. But I knew you'd want to get your hands on them as soon as practicable, and oh, love, I don't know when we'll get to go home again. I hope these ideas I have about river hydromancy work, but I don't know. And we may need these shrews' venom if the hydromancy doesn't do enough against the worst excesses of the Directorate. We may need everything we've got. But anyway, Stelving, he was an absolute peach. I wasn't only using grand procession as a code for our escape. All the faculty had to participate in a grand procession, full robes and pointy hats and all, yuck, for the glory of the new Directorate, enough to make one vomit. But I processed past the remaining directors, beaming, and then in the milling chaos that always follows every pointy hat occasion, Stelving and my department colluded to mislead everyone about my whereabouts. I was here. I was there. Isn't that Arendt over there talking to the new bursar behind the column? And gave me time to get clear. There's been nowhere to dispose of the damned hat, so I will arrive with it. The robes, too. If the Wolfgrove University doesn't hold with them, we can make them particularly garish curtains for our new home together. I hope there's no trouble transferring young Vithro's classes and research experience. We should really just call her Vithro now, as there are no others left. Poor child. She was, as I hinted to you, living in the basement of the hydromancy department, which is particularly damp and uncomfortable. There was nothing for it but to bring her. 2 things gave me pause about the fate of our city. 1, there was a great rumbling in the earth the first night we were away from it. I'm suspicious that it might be the earthworkers. The Directorate has been attempting to bribe them with grandiose projects, but I think their patience may run short, and who knows what then? Who knows what now? Stelving and I have a symbolic code arranged in hopes that I will be able to do more with the water samples in a department with funding. So I hope that he can come close to some kind of accommodation with the earthworkers. I really don't know. The other thing is, Mithra pointed out to me the most curious illusionary labyrinths around what we realized were the entrances to the dams of rune beavers. And I realized that they are rodents too. Very, very big rodents on the river leading to our city. And apparently some reason the ancients associated them with runes? Oh dear. No, I have not managed to secure a rune beaver for you to study. It can be field research for us to do together once we're settled in our home with its gaudy doctoral robe curtains. Our home. I like the sound of that, even if it's not where we first imagined it. I'm coming to you, Pippa. It will be our home when I'm with you. And the shrews and dormice just have to learn to live with it. I love you. I love you. Aaron. So there is that one. Do I have time for Flash, do you think, Laura?
Yes, definitely time for Flash.
Okay, well, this is a completely different tone and content of piece. This one originally appeared in the Futures section. And it is called The Foolish Man, Parking Lots with No Cars, Roads Going Nowhere. We needed so much, but we had so many of the wrong things. It was all in the way. All our elders told us we were supposed to be dreaming big dreams, making grand plans, but there was no room for that. Not when every tree we tried to plant was stunted by the looming abandoned big box stores. I don't know why everyone blames me, if they knew it was me, for seeing concrete as the villain. The way we all talked, it was. It was. Look at pictures of a demolition site sometime, or read the accounts of walking through a concrete meadow. Even the toughest grasses could barely get a toehold, and nothing deeper could grow. It was going to take centuries for them to break it down, millennia even. No forests would take their places, and the winds that would blow across them, we couldn't wait. We couldn't deal with the erosion. We couldn't deal with the tornadoes. We couldn't deal with the inability to sequester carbon. We needed the concrete gone. You would have done the same. Maybe you were trying to do the same too. Some of your labs were trying. We talked about it at conferences. We all gave those talks. You had your heads next to mine in the bars after hours. We didn't whisper sweet nothings. We talked about how to get rid of that goddamn concrete. I'm not the mad scientist just because I'm the one who succeeded. I thought I could control it. It's the cry of the mad scientist. I know. I thought I could control it. But I did think I did. A dissolving compound for the cement and the concrete to make it break down in a non-toxic way, so that we could have that land back again, so that we could till that soil, plant it, work the land there. And we can. I won. We all won. No, I know. It's just that there was no reason to think it would replicate. It's not a lie. It still isn't. It never was. It just auto-catalyzes is all. It's fine. It's a normal thing for chemicals to do. There's just a nice little chain reaction that really anything might do, because it's got the silicate groups hanging out, being more or less inert over there. And then the oxygen does its thing, because oxygen, you know how oxygen is. You could hardly expect it not to, the little devil. And, well, you know, you do know how much was made of concrete that is now made of sand. People got really upset about the hospitals, foremost, and the schools, and okay, really most modern buildings. Most modern buildings had concrete somewhere or another. But the hospitals were the part that really seemed to get under their skin the most, having nowhere to take the injured people from the other building collapses except for tents outside. And I can see why it bothered them. I didn't expect it either. And my sister was in one of those tents, yelling and trying to get a generator up so she could save as many people as she could. I was proud of the work she did. She hasn't had the time to talk to me about the big picture ever since. She's mostly sleeping in one of those tents near the hospital. Says they need all hands. She was a clinic pediatrician before, but she's all emergency all the time now, she says. It'll settle out soon. We can talk about it later. Lots of nice things like to eat, like sandy soils, root veg, like carrots and parsnips and potatoes. We can make this work. If we can get the seeds to grow, greens and strawberries and tomatoes, all of it will grow in sandy soil. It always has. The polymer concretes seem to be doing all right too, so we can just make more of those. And not the asphalt and cement ones. So we'll just get right on that when we have the building facilities, the communication facilities, and all of that stuff to make polymers. I used to think concrete was a huge problem, and remaking the world is not easy. The skies are quieter now, have you noticed? The large jets can't taxi on runways that don't exist. I suppose most of their hangars had substantial concrete in the construction as well. May take a minute for the birds to come back, but all things in life need patience. And no, I suppose the concrete solution was a rather fast one, but we'd had it for ages. Did you know the Romans built with it? That's why we couldn't get rid of even some of their ruins. Well, that's settled now, just piles of rocks. They're much easier to move. Even the Pantheon, you can do whatever you like with that, just as you could with any abandoned superstore, stuck together with concrete until now. Don't tell anyone it was me. They do seem upset, and I'd rather not go into it for now. Not until they've readjusted. Isn't it nice, though, to just take your shoes off and dig your toes into the sand? No one ever said that about concrete. No one ever looked forward to tying their shoelaces together, slinging their shoes around their neck, and setting off down a long, winding road of concrete. So there you had my scientist-themed stories, one of them a little less mad than the other, and thank you so much for having me.
Thank you so much. The first one was lovely, but I enjoyed the mood change as well. Daniel, we've had another wonderful evening. Or to Michael, very, very early morning.
Yeah, lovely work, both of you. Thank you so much.
Yeah,
And I love
thank
how
you.
well they went together. All the stories felt so personal in the narrative. And I don't mean personal to the writer. I mean, they felt like they were coming very personally from the narrators. Which sounds like it should always be a narrator thing, but it's not. Some narrators are not very personal. They're more reporting. So, a wonderful week. Thank you. We do this every week. We'll be back again next week, but we have different readers next week. We have Isabel J. Kim and Mariska Pichette. And I do recommend checking storyhour2020.com to see if anything changes, if any of your other favorite writers are going to be reading soon. And if some of your favorites have been on recently and you've missed them, you can just go to the Story Hour page on Facebook and you can go pretty much back to the beginning, right, Daniel?
Yep.
So that would be well over 100 hours of stories told. Imagine. And I do often go back and rewatch them. Well, Michael, Marissa, thank you both so much for telling us your stories. They've been just wonderful. And thank you to my co-host, Daniel Marcus, without whom none of us would be here. And thank you to all of you who are joining us to watch, joining us to listen, joining us to chat on the side in Zoom and Facebook. Thank you for helping us spin the fictive dream together. Good night.